Hey there, self-care warriors. Get ready to dive into another episode of Hold My Purse. This show is your no-nonsense guide to making you the headliner in your life with some badass self-care. Today, we've got a rock star in the house, my former colleague, Laken Faccio. She's here to drop some truth bombs about pushing herself to the brink at work and then having a day of reckoning that led to the most fearless self-care move you can imagine. This ain't your grandma's self-care podcast, people. This is where real stories and bold actions collide. You better believe you don't want to miss this roller coaster of a conversation. So without further ado, let's crank up the volume and get this party started. Hello, Laken. Welcome to the show. Hold My Purse, a self-care journey through life. How you feeling today?
Hey, bro. I'm so excited to get to do this with you. And I'm also so honored to be a part of this since you just started this self-care podcast journey yourself. And yeah, it's awesome. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So I found your story to be absolutely amazing because, like I said at the beginning, we work together. And we had this huge bonding moment one day in a restaurant called Alta's in LA. And you literally leaned in and was like, girl, what's your story? So now I'm going to lean into you and say, girl, what's your story?
I love that so much because that was I love that moment with us personally. Yes. That was one of my faves. But yeah, I mean, I'm so excited to share this. And honestly, when you originally asked, like, hey, would you share your story? I feel like, you always kind of question, like, well, why my story, right? Like, is it worth sharing? That kind of question kind of comes into mind. But what I think is really helpful is in my personal experience, like, I think about self-care so differently because I've been so bad at it for so long, right? And so I feel like just hearing some of your like other episodes and experiences that you've had, I mean, on my end, I've noticed you kind of have to like get in the trenches and go through some shit before you can really come through and understand like how to take care of yourself the best way. So anyway, I like to say like you have to be in the trenches to really know your limits. And I think throughout my journey, like I've finally started to realize like, okay, start listening to what's happening because the patterns keep showing up. And, once you're in these trenches, it's like, how do I stop myself from continuing to fall into these habits? So anyway, so that's like overarching a little bit about, where my mental story has started and been. But yeah, no, I'm down to get into all the weeds.
Let's get into it. So you talk about the trenches. Tell me define what these trenches are and how they have impacted you.
Yeah. So, well, and I guess I should clarify, like I'll speak mostly to my trenches in the workplace because that's really where I've done the most work, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
So yeah, when it comes to just what I mean with trenches, like I've noticed over time, my intentions in the workplace, I give a lot of myself, and I do this personally in life. And it makes a lot of sense personally in life when you invest in your relationships, you're investing in the things around you. But when it comes to work, I would always double down and invest in work in a way that, at the end of the day, it's kind of a transaction. Like you're getting paid, you're doing a job. But I would like double down and invest in such a way where I would give so much of myself. And as much as a workplace can say, we care about our people, we'll love on you, we want to make sure you're doing okay, at the end of the day, you're there to work. So they're going to take and take and take all that they can, right?
Squeeze, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so I feel like with my trenches, it's just a recognition of me realizing like I'm giving too much because people will keep taking. And that kind of comes in the form, like, I'll just like more specifically, it comes in the form of like, hey, you're on PTO and you're asked to change your schedule and prioritize work over that, or, working extended hours and overtime, or working on something you don't maybe believe in, it doesn't align with your personal values. So I just feel like some of those have shown up in my career and I've given too much and certainly questioned myself, like, why am I doing this? Right. And for a long time, I was really, really bad at saying no. And I just always kept giving.
Right. I remember when we first started working together, I was like, man, she is so cool. She has this bubbly personality. And every single time I reached out to you with an ask, you never said no. And if you couldn't do it in that moment, you said, I will come back to you and let you know when I can. At what point did you realize, you know what? I need to say no, like no,
Just no.
and mean it. Because just getting back to what you said, it's like you give so much of yourself. And I can attest to that. You really do. But at the detriment of yourself, right?
Yeah. And that, like, exactly. That's what happens. I think saying no and how I've started to have to say no is I've realized I actually, and this is really interesting, like I've realized I need to put myself in a position when it comes to relationships, work, all those things
Mm-hmm.
where people are looking out for my no. Like, I think that's what's really interesting because I need people to know like who I am. And when I say no, like it almost needs to be more like a trigger for them. Like, oh, she's actually saying no. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think part of it is like building that relationship or having that relationship with your manager or, you know, your spouse or different people in your lives to make sure there's that boundary in place. Cause I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people's no's can get pushed back on. And that was something I was really bad with too. Like I might say, oh no, I don't think I can handle that right now. But then I'll get pushed back on and I'll always make room for it. Right. So it's like no should mean no. And you almost have to find the
Right.
people that'll listen to that and respect it.
Got it. So I know when we first chatted about having this conversation, you were talking to me about the beginning of your career and in college and what like kind of set the tone for your mindset. Can you like share that? Because I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I was in college, this was back like early 2010s. My experience is really interesting because I was graduating at a time where social media was
Mhm.
taking off, right? Like we had just gotten past having to have like a college login for Facebook. So now everyone was on Facebook. You got lots of people recognizing that their brands can have a place on these platforms and these social platforms. And so when I was entering advertising, and I wanted to do strategy or something like it, I was very open to what I could do because I just wanted a job, honestly, and I wanted to get my foot in the door.
Right.
And so social, because it was so big and growing, very much
Mhm.
fell in my lap. And it was also one of those things where they wanted a lot of younger employees to come in with that know-how because we were growing up with it, right? Like we were learning it as it was all coming out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so I started in social, and like, oh my gosh, talk about a fun freaking job, right? Like it's so much fun. And I think that's the thing, like, not that it's bad, but I think like people look at it and they're like, oh, you just have a fun job. And it's like, well,
Right.
it is fun, but it comes with a lot more, I think, baggage and weight that people don't necessarily recognize. Cause yeah, once like now all the platforms have evolved. And once you've established your brand in that space, I mean, it turns into like you as a social media manager representing a brand for the whole internet, right? And we can't control the internet. So
Right.
it's just so interesting because when I first started, entered in social, and like I was kind of explaining, and when we chatted, my initial thought was, hey, I'm going to go all in on this, right? Like I'm going to totally
Mhm.
lean into work. I feel like growing up, and I don't know if you can relate, and maybe listeners can, but I feel like growing up, I was always told, if you find a job you love, you'll never work a
Mhm.
day in your life.
Yes.
And that was, yeah, right. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people say that, and that was kind of my intent. And when I found this social thing, I was like, okay, yes, like this is it. This is going to be so much fun. But then what you don't realize is you like work becomes you, right? Like it almost turns
Right.
into your identity in a way. And I just fully like absorb myself into my job because of that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And I think one of the other things I'll share too is that right when I was graduating, Sheryl Sandberg, who was a part of the executive leadership at Facebook, had just come out with her book called Lean In. And this was a book that I think just took like college women by storm. Like everyone was reading it. Everyone was talking about it. And just like the quote I kind of said earlier about like, find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That mentality paired with this idea of like female leadership in the workplace really put an emphasis on like, you got to give it your all. And I mean, her book's called Lean In, and it's about, I mean, you could go, I mean, she was very eloquent in a lot of things she said, but it's also about like sacrificing your family, giving up on, not giving up on relationships, but like putting relationships aside, prioritizing work, walking in like a boss and sitting at the table and not being the one to, you know, wait your turn in line for things. It's just, it was so interesting. It was very empowering, but also it was almost like give up on everything else. Like your job is your life. I mean, it's just so interesting that I feel like that was the message that I ended up receiving after reflecting on it, you know?
And you know what's so crazy about that? So that was what, 2014?
Yeah. Yep.
So now 6 years later, post-pandemic, it is the complete opposite, right? People want balance in their lives. They don't want to go to the office. They want remote and hybrid. I mean, it's becoming a situation where what she was saying in 2014 may have been for that time, but now everybody's trying to hear that shit. Like, I don't stress myself out. I want to earn my money. Yes. I'm going to give it my all. Yes. But I'm not going to sacrifice me in the process. You know?
And I think that's, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most healthy things that's come out of the pandemic is just this resurgence of values and what matters and prioritizing your time. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah, it's kind of sad, but that book is outdated and irrelevant.
It's outdated at this point.
Yep. I don't even recommend people picking it up, to be honest.
I hear that because that is so counter to where we need to be as a society in general. I think people are just fundamentally overworked to their detriment. And that's why people are so stressed out and depressed and so much anxiety. Capitalist America really just, you know, sticking the screws to us because you go over in Europe, they don't work like this. So it's just a different mindset, right?
Completely. Absolutely.
So I remember you shared this story and I really wanted you to kind of talk about it. And of course, we can't mention the names of companies, but you had a profound experience post-pandemic or during the pandemic at a work environment. Can you share that story?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So and I think one of the reasons it was so profound is this was one of my first jobs right out of college. And I, like we said, like I gave it my all, like I put everything into this job. And I feel like, you know, 2020 came with the pandemic and then a social reckoning too around, you know, George Floyd's murder and a whole resurgence and conversation around social justice issues. And what is so interesting is at this workplace, there have been a lot of issues at this workplace over a very long time, but like top headlines are like, we had no HR department. There was no, yeah, I know, right? No HR department. And what's funny is this was my first job. I thought this was normal, Rhonda. Like I didn't even, you know what I mean? Like I didn't question it. I'm like, okay, I guess this is just how adults function without having any, you know, checks and balances.
First impressions of a job is always like that, bro.
But yeah, so this job was, I mean, it was pretty strict, very disciplined. And honestly, a lot of that like gave me some really hard work ethic. And I think like, sure, that was fantastic. But overall, one of the biggest issues was that our CEO was 84 years old and he loved his company so much. I mean, what's so funny is like he like he's the definition of becoming your job. You know what I mean? So anyway, yeah, he loved his job so much he wouldn't retire. But he had very, very outdated, I shouldn't even say outdated, just absolutely wrong values when it came to racism. And in one of our big meetings. He had some very specific comments making note on how the work is too Black, or some really rude comments and overtly racist comments. Mm-hmm. And because I think everything that was happening in 2020, people were fed up. I mean, there had always been, maybe like smaller, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, like just like bad culture issues. Mm-hmm. But I think in the long run, I think this was like the straw that broke the camel's back, because everybody had just had enough and was willing to speak up, right? And say like, we can't be saying this. One, you shouldn't be leading a company if you're saying this. Like, there's just so many issues with it. And so what ended up happening was this got leaked to the press. And because it got leaked to the press, of course, the press went and asked a lot of our clients, will you continue working with a company that has these values? And of course, the answer is no. And so a lot of them left immediately. And then as employees, like, we found this out through headlines. I mean, we didn't know that this was all happening. So I think what was really sad and scary is tying an identity to a workplace and putting yourself into it and going all in and loving it. Mm-hmm. And then when something like this happens and something falls apart and it overtly like doesn't represent your values. I mean, I felt like I was walking around with the scarlet letter on my resume, like it was so sad and just scary, traumatizing. I can
only imagine.
Not to mention, everybody else in the workplace who was going through just some really, really big issues. I mean, I can't imagine also being a person of color and having your CEO say things like that. I mean, it was awful. So that being said, though,
continue, let me ask you this question. Yeah. So you said there were little things that were happening that no one kind of raised the flag. I'm wondering if that's because they didn't have an HR to raise the flag too.
I mean, absolutely. Yeah.
But two, what was like the water cooler conversation about that? If you had any insights to what Black people were thinking during those times when there were small little, because I have to tell you, over the years, I have experienced a lot of that in the workplace. And the Black folks would be loud as hell about what was happening. Now, a lot of times to our detriment, we would get let go, but we would still speak up. And I'm just curious to what were people of color thinking before George Floyd? Like, how were they processing the behaviors that were happening?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Obviously, I can only speak to the friends that I had in the workplace and their experiences. And obviously, I'm not them, but from the fantastic friendships that I've developed. So I will say there's a couple things that happened at this place of employment. I was almost going to say it. One, people were speaking up. And I think that was really important. But what started to form was essentially almost like an internal task force to try and change things. And it was almost like we had to pitch and convince leadership why what was happening was problematic. Jeez. And so, talk about on top of your job and trying to do extra, get promoted, all those things. You're also now trying to fix the culture of a workplace environment. And one of my big things was it shouldn't be on the Black people at the agency to have to educate everybody about this, right? Like, I think that's one of the biggest learnings that people should be thinking through. But anyway, I specific examples and stuff. I mean, there was lots of conversations about how, this pisses me off so much. So one day something would be missing on someone's desk and people would be like, I wonder if so-and-so took it. And it's like, oh, well, why that person? Yes.
Shut up.
No, I know. That's shitty stuff like that.
Stereotyping. Wow.
No, overt stereotyping. And then, so things like that, classic, touching Black women's hair in meetings. I mean, I know I've heard so many horror stories around that. It's just so disrespectful. There's plenty more, but there were a lot of small things that, And honestly, those aren't even small. Like those are probably bigger examples that should have gone to HR and been much bigger conversations. But again, we didn't have that. So, and to like talk about the mental toll that takes when you're in a workplace like that too. Yeah. Anyway, so between that and then everything that our CEO said and things just falling apart, I mean, it was heartbreaking. But the people were resilient in so many ways and had each other's back and worked through it, and found other places of employment. And, you know, I think what's so crazy is I have some of my best friends today who I went through that experience with, you know, and I think that as difficult as that was, you know, you got to be in the trenches to learn some of that self-care. Right. And that's how I feel about a lot of it. So, just drawing a very fine line, like you are not your place of employment. You know, your values do not have to specifically match theirs, and what they say is not who you are. And it's just a healthy reminder. Like, again, I feel like this is like something outdated that I'm saying, because I feel like since the pandemic, we've all kind of worked through a lot of this, but yeah, I mean, I think anybody entering the workforce now, just needs to have that like healthier mindset going in.
Yeah, I mean, that self-awareness is key. And I applaud you for saying, you know what, this is not right. You were so self-aware of the impact it was having on you internally and within the workplace. So now talk to me about what came after that. Like, what did you decide to do when you were like, oh, hell to the no, this isn't working. Y'all losing clients. It's time to jump ship. Walk me through what happened next.
Oh, yeah. Well, there were two things. One, there was a period where everyone was like, oh my gosh, let's fix this. Like, now we can have a conversation. Okay. Now we can really try to like make this better. And I think the intentions were right, but the execution and how quickly people were moving was not. So after probably like 5 months, there were a lot of this that bounced right away. And then after about 5 months, I did leave as well. And what was interesting was I had been working in social. And I knew that because like we were kind of talking about this, like social there's so much that you can't control. The platforms are changing all the time. There was so much about it that I wanted to like step away from as well, almost like more of a mental health move, right? Like I think it would be better for me to maybe focus on strategy and consumer insights outside of social. So that was one of my goals when looking for a new place, because I wanted to maybe make that transition and push myself to learn a little bit more, but maybe strike a healthier balance, right? So I went to my next company, and honestly loved it. Like loved it, had such a great boss, like enjoyed it so much. It was a much better like mental health reset for me. Okay. And I like kind of knew, I'm like, okay, I think I found what I like to do. It's consumer insights, and this is what I want to focus on. And I've like found some great people through that. And then it got really interesting because after about a couple of years, I got a call from a former coworker and colleague to come work with her and lead her team. And it was something that I had, you know, we had like joked about us working together again, but it was like too soon after, you know, I had just left. And so it had been about 2 years. I was like, okay, yeah, maybe let's give this a go. But the catch was it was back in social. And so
the thing that stressed you out.
Girl, I know. And I think the problem is in my head, I was like, well, I've matured. I've set good boundaries. Like maybe I can handle this again. Maybe social would be fine. Right. Things have progressed. Like maybe it's all okay now. And so I took that leap of faith, and moved jobs again, and was so excited because it also came with, you know, a bit more of like a director title and things of that nature, where I felt like I could really lead a team and maybe have some more respect in the workplace. But I think what was so frustrating for me about all that is I just walked myself right back into my old habits and trap, you know, and like I should have known better.
And what were some of what were the traps? Because this is where we started to work together.
Yeah.
And we just like bonded over our work woes. But this is all about you. So talk to us about some of the traps that you found yourself back in, and then what you did to get out of it.
Yeah. Well, so I walked right into a situation where I was going to be a remote employee, which was like a little bit
Mhm.
of an exemption to the rule, because I think people were coming in the office maybe like once a week on Wednesdays or something.
Exactly.
And as I started joining, I think it turned into more days a week. Like the expectation was like, oh, we're really returning to office now, much more hybrid. Which I wasn't expecting. So like that was it was interesting. Like I walked into what I knew might be a tough situation, and it like got tougher the second I got there because expectations were different on return to office. And then travel expectations totally changed. So I think what was really interesting is being remote, I totally agreed to the fact that like, hey, make sure you come in, get to know your team in person. And like, there really is such a strong like value in that when you first start and like really establishing yourself, getting to know one another. And I was like, yes, absolutely. I will come in and meet the teams and come out to LA, meet that team, you know,
Right.
things of that nature. So was totally down to do that. And then I think just the demand of, hey, clients want more meetings in person. You're going to be traveling all these weeks. And I think I traveled 18 out of 24 weeks in the first half of 2023.
That's insane. That is insane.
It was gross. Like I love traveling, and it burned me out. Like it wasn't enjoyable anymore. It was so sad. What stinks is I really did try to say no. And that was just met with a lot of, you know, you really should be here. We need you here. Like, even if I was on vacation, and this is where like those red flags started showing up, it would be like, hey, we actually need you to head out a day early so you can be here for this client meeting instead.
That just like crosses every boundary. Because I remember one time you were going on vacation. They asked you to cut your vacation short.
Yeah.
To a client meeting. I was like, what the fuck? Like, who does that? Like, who asked for something like that? And so what were you thinking when they asked you to do that? Because I would have been like, oh, hell no, you have to figure this out. But you and I are just different people, because you were good.
I know. Well, you say that, but this is where like I just fell into such bad traps. Like I said no. I went to my manager and like specifically shared the situation. And even then it was, no, you really need to prioritize this. And I think what's really interesting was it wasn't like this had been a client meeting that had been planned for a long time. Like it was spontaneous. And I almost wanted to be like, well, why does their spontaneous trip change my long-term plans? Right. Like,
exactly.
And I did say that, but it was, I mean,
fell on deaf ears, I'm sure.
Advertising in general, I have like in my process of going through all this, like it's a service industry. And I've realized that now. And like, you really are providing for clients at every, you know, time and need. And I wish that there were better boundaries there, but I think some agencies just look at it as like, this is our job. We have to show up. But I would almost think like, hey, maybe our clients would respect us more if we actually put some of those boundaries in place, right? Like I think that could be healthy for everyone. But hey, that's just my opinion. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, where I was going with all that, but into it, Rhonda.
You really did. I'm totally tracking, because I was like, they are wearing this girl out. I mean, it was just insanity. And then you had a pivotal moment, right? You went on vacation. You went to Portugal to celebrate a milestone birthday. Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, Portugal's phenomenal. I think everyone needs 100% to go there.
Agree.
Oh my gosh, just incredible country. But yeah, so most people like go on a vacation and come back refreshed, feeling good, excited for you know, level set, feeling recharged. I came back from this vacation, and mind you, this was a vacation where I like did not check email, did not, you know, go through everything. So I was putting those boundaries in place, really trying. And when I got back, you know, there's this weird pressure of like, the day you get back, you don't, at least in the situation I was in, I wasn't getting any grace to like have a few days to catch up and ramp up. It was like, there were meetings that I needed to know what happened for a week and a half. So I had to like catch up on the weekend. So I started going through emails on a Saturday and could feel like my heart like racing. I was starting to get migraines and a headache and like genuinely like had a panic attack. Like my body was reacting so negatively to the work environment and the stress and the situations that I was under, that it was just such a reminder of like how toxic things had gotten and how bad I had let it get. And I fell apart. I mean, truly, like it's one of those things where like, I wish I was stronger, but I just fell apart. So ended up having to step away from that. I'm in tears. I'm like talking to Mitch, that's my husband, talking to Mitch and telling him how, I don't know if I can do this. I'm literally falling apart right now. This isn't okay. And then we slept on it and I woke up and Mitch tells the story way better because it's so funny.
Or it's Mitch.
Yeah, I know. I wake up at like 5:45 a.m. and that's early for me. Like, I know you get up early because you're a good workout person and I'm just not that person yet. But no, I got up super early and I had like this epiphany, like so much clarity and like grace had come over me where it was one word. It was quit. Like you can quit.
Hello.
Right. Like just weird that had to happen to me. But I woke him up and I'm like, Mitch, I figured it out. I'm just going to quit. And he's like, what? Like, are we really having this conversation at 6 a.m.? But it was truly like such a pivotal moment where I was like, I am not okay. And the only way for me to be okay is to remove myself from this situation. Like I had to, and I had to do it quickly as well, because I really wasn't okay. Like it was one of those things like this isn't like, this is going to go off the rails and I'm going to probably end up needing to go to a doctor if I'm not like just ending it quickly and swiftly.
And I can totally relate because I remember like I was telling you during around that same time, because, obviously we were working together, I was having severe like anxiety attacks. I remember one time I had a meeting that I was supposed to lead and I literally could not bring myself up off the bathroom floor. Like I was so sick to my stomach. And it wasn't even because what I was presenting was going to be bad or challenging. What I came to realize is it was the people that just made me ill. So I can totally relate to that. And it wasn't even the client. It was the literally the people that I was working with on a daily basis that just sucked the life out of me. Just energy vampires that I would say. But I'm curious to know because you read your emails, full on panic attack, actually go to sleep and then wake up and like, poof, I'm done. Like, did you dream about quitting? Like what was that? I'm like, is that like the alternate universe coming in and saying, girl, get out? Like in the movie, get out, like now. What
had to have been.
Yeah.
Like it had to have been. I mean, I don't remember dreaming, but I'm pretty sure I probably did, you know what I mean? Like I probably dreamed that I was quitting or something, you know what I mean? Yeah. I was just like, that's it. I got to do it. That's the answer. And I think like what was really, really weird in all of this is like, there's so much. And I keep going back to like how I felt in the beginning of like my identity and I have to be leaned in and I have to be so into this job. And I think for the first time I was like, I don't have to be like, I actually don't have to be. And it sucks that it took so long and it's like 9 years of this career and I feel like I was almost throwing it away in a weird way, but it was like, no, I'm not my job. I'm so much better than feeling like this. Like this is such a toxic environment. And also toxic environment for me. And I know also for you, it's like, maybe some people can thrive in that. Go for it. That's great. If that's your thing, but it was not me. Nope, exactly. And I think that's just that's the story, right? It's like, I learned what I needed in that moment, and it was to say bye. And as hard as that was.
So this is like Sunday, you get this epiphany, like clarity, like quitting. The next morning, Monday, walk us through what that looked like when you finally said done.
I am such a like want to make everybody happy, love to like bring up team spirits and all that. Like I'm like I love keeping the peace. And I knew I was gonna just blow shit up on Monday. Yep. And so I was so nervous. But I also had like this weird sense of like purpose and drive where I was like, I can't feel these emotions right now. I've got to do this. Like there's no like I feel bad. Like it was like, Laken, you got to look out for yourself. Like you have to prioritize you. And I think that's what got me through it. It was almost like, girl, if you don't do this, no one else will. Like you have to figure it out for yourself. And that was a really just tough conversation because I think like I wanted to explain so much, but I didn't. It was one of those things where it was like, hey, this is gonna be my last week. And I'm so sorry that I need to do this, but I have to step away from this job. And it was like, I don't have anything else lined up. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like I had no plans, but I was willing to bet on myself. And I think that was the coolest part of all of it really was just like, you're going to figure this out, you know?
And I remember you slacked me and you were like, hey, remember I had a great vacation, but I quit today. And I was like, yo, that's the ultimate badass self-care move.
And honestly, like, I appreciate that so much.
I was like, girl, I'm so happy for you. Like, I was relieved for you. I mean, I could just see like it all just went away. Like,
yeah. I remember that too. Cause like I had just come back. We were going to catch up on everything since I was out. And like you had work for me. And I remember like following up with you and I was like, I can totally help you through this week, but I am done. And you were like, yeah. Like you were excited that I wasn't going to be able to help.
I wasn't even mad. I was like, yo, sign me up. But what I thought was so like, ultimately like just courageous on your part was, I mean, people usually don't just quit a job and not have something lined up. But I love what you said. And you was like, you know what? I'm going to bet on myself and I am going to put myself first, which is what, you know, everything that I'm trying to do on this podcast is encourage people to put themselves first and have that peace of mind. And you know what? The universe will align and you will find something. And you did.
That's right. Yeah. Because you're right. Like people don't usually do anything this crazy, which, you know, I arguably was probably the craziest thing I've done. I don't know. But I think what was so cool was typically when you're like applying for jobs while working, you're not publicizing the fact that you're looking to leave, right? Like it kind of puts you in a tough situation where you got to be a little hush hush, quiet. And to have the freedom to say, hey, I'm open right now. Like, please, I would love to have conversations, want to network. Like I was received, like so many people received that and they were just like, wow, yeah, let's talk. Like, glad that you're in the middle of a transition. Like, there was no shame. There was no, oh, I can't believe you couldn't work through that. Like, that wasn't the conversation.
The mindset is different with people nowadays. Like these companies, like where we were, that want to make people grind and push and push and push. That's not how people want to live now. It's just not. Those days are over. Not. Like, that's like old school advertising, like Mad Men back in the day. We're not doing that.
We don't need that anymore at all. Yeah. And I think what's also great is you can have very, very intentional conversations like with your next employer too. And I think what was so cool was my current boss, I probably had just as many questions for her as she had for me in this interview. And she was just so gracious and like she even like, let's set up another 30 minutes and you can ask me more questions. And I was like, this is the kind of woman I want to work for. Like she's making time for me. She's prioritizing me. And I can tell like she will work with me to protect like what's important to me. You know what I mean? So anyway, it just gives you so much more freedom and clarity to look for what you need in your next step, in your next role, which is, it's awesome.
Yeah,
it's very
I
freeing.
Yeah, I love that you went in intentional and asked all the questions you need because you wanted to get some clarity and find out, hey, are there any red flags here? So congrats you. I love your journey and I absolutely adored working with you. But I do have I have one last question. Now that you've gone through all of this full circle, what have you learned about infusing self-care into your life?
Oh, yeah, such a good question. Self-care for me looks maybe a little bit more unique because I realize like I am such a giver and keep putting myself in those situations of giving and giving and giving. And I joke with Mitch all the time, like when I have downtime, I like fill it with like doing things for other people. And he's like, how about you just take a beat and do something for yourself?
I love Mitch. Come on, Mitch, come with it. Yes.
Yep. No, like, and what is so powerful though, is like, I'm so lucky I have a partner that knows me and is able to push me in that direction. And it's like, that's what makes us work. Because if I had somebody that took, like we'd crash and burn. Like, I know we would, I couldn't survive in that. And so I've been reading more, I've been working out. Mitch and I have started rock climbing, which is so much fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, I feel like a kid and I'm like able to like explore the things I love again. And it's so silly that why wasn't I doing this sooner? Right? It's like life is way too short to just throw everything into your career and not make room for yourself. So it's a tough lesson learned, but I'm so glad that I've gotten there because it's so important.
I love that. So final question. If everyone in their lives had to implement a boundary, what would you say is the boundary you would demand people to implement into their lives?
Oh my goodness. I would say even when you don't have something planned, like that doesn't mean you're available. And I think that's a huge lesson that I've learned.
I love that. And it's funny you say that because I had a situation today. A friend of mine is having this gala tonight. And last minute, she sent me an invite to come. And she sent it on Monday and it's tonight. And I'm like, girl, no.
Yes. It's just too much, too fast. Yeah.
Like, no, I'm going to do me tonight. So that would be no. Well,
exactly.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And I cannot wait to see where you go with your career and, talk to you about all the self-care activities that you're doing, that you are loving, because Mitch is going to make sure you make time for yourself. And I like that about him. I haven't met him, but I love that about him already.
Right. No, I love it. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah. And honestly, like you coming out and doing this too, and like talking about self-care as a superpower it's such a good reminder. It's like, yes, keep putting this at the forefront and reminding it needs to be a reminder because people like me will keep forgetting if it's not, so it's just so powerful.
All right. Well, thanks again. And, I have much love for you. And I'm going to make my way to Dallas at some point.
Oh, can't wait to see you. We'll have a party.
All right.
Love it. Thanks, Rhonda.
See, didn't I tell you? My girl was not messing around. It takes guts to drop that I quit bomb without a safety net. But she bet on herself, and I'm here to tell you, you should too. Remember, the universe has a way of falling into place when you trust your instincts and take those bold steps. So go out there, own your path, and live your life unapologetically and in peace. Up next, Aria Speaks. Hey, Aria.
Hi, Mimi.
Out with your dad yesterday all day. What did you do with your daddy?
I went to the beach.
You went to the beach?
Yes.
What'd you do at the beach?
I just went clam digging.
Clam digging?
Yep, and I found a lot of clams.
How many clams did you find?
I found mussel clams.
Mussel clams?
And I ate that for dinner.
No.
And guess what?
What?
They had a pearl. It had a pearl in the middle.
Get out of here. Did you take it out?
Mm-hmm. It's that what my dad. He put it in the little bag.
Do you remember that time that you brought home 2 crabs in a jar?
Now somebody gave it to me.
Somebody, and then what did Paris do? She took them back to the beach, right? You remember?
Wait, where did she drop them?
She just put them back in the ocean because you remember I told you that it wasn't nice to kind of take them away from their home and their family, so we took them back to the beach, right?
Well, they were on the rocks, so Paris should have put them back on the rocks.
Well, she wasn't there when you picked them up, so she didn't know exactly where to go.
Actually, I picked them up.
You picked them up?
Well, I helped them pick them up because I had like gloves on, so they don't pinch me.
Oh, well, that was smart.
So I did this, I think, with my sweater, like this.
Oh, okay. And then you just picked them up with your hands?
Yeah.
No, that's cool. You named the crabs what?
I named one Fifi and Kiki.
Those are cute names. Where'd you get those names from?
I don't know. I just found them.
Oh, okay.
And this is what my dog's toy is named. Puppuccino.
Your dog's toy, your toy dog's name is Puppuccino?
Yeah.
Chowder likes puppuccinos, doesn't he?
Yeah, but now he can't eat them.
Why?
Because he gets stomach ache.
Oh, okay. That's true. He'll make him sick.
And guess what? I found one ears, but I can't find the other one. That's all I gotta say.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your stories today.
You're welcome.
All right. I love you.
I love you too, Mimi.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Shout out to Aria and her fun stories. Oh my gosh, she's so freaking adorable. Well, that's it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it and feel inspired to dive deep into your self-care journey. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends. My mission is to build a community of self-care warriors, one show at a time. So let self-care be your ride or die companion on this wild journey we call life. Slay those challenges, conquer those obstacles, and as always, keep your self-care purse within arm's reach. Until next time, my fabulous friends, remember to put yourself first and to hold my purse. Peace.